Everything began with a massive catastrophe that changed the lives of all humanity. The main character felt exhausted, and all of his friends were dead. The worst part was that there was a deep bite mark on his neck, and that meant that soon he would turn into a zombie. His dead friends began to move. They had been killed by mutants, and now they were starting to turn into them. 3 long years had passed since the zombies appeared. The human world had been completely destroyed, and every day was a fight for survival. While the hero was still able to stay conscious, he tried to get back on his feet, but he could feel his body beginning to weaken. Because of the apocalypse, people started hunting each other. A war for resources was raging, and everyone was ready to kill one another for food or water. Now a war between 2 of the most ruthless bosses was underway. So many people fought in a senseless war that solved nothing. It was the end. Now all the dead soldiers had become mutants. No one was left. There were so many zombies that the boy lost faith that he could win. Had he really come this far just to die so easily? No, he couldn't give up that easily, so he tried to fight the attackers off. He had a sword, and during the apocalypse, he realized it was the best weapon against a large number of enemies. Another thrust. With a single strike, he sliced off parts of a zombie's body. But there were so many that they soon managed to surround him. The hero understood it was the end. Now he would become the same as them. He woke up on a sunny day. Opening his eyes, he realized he had traveled back in time to 6 months before the apocalypse began. He tried to find a new place to live, so he was inspecting a new property. The new house they showed him fit his description and needs perfectly. It even had its own solar generator just as he wanted. The house was protected by tall gates, and the fence was reinforced. Besides, there were hardly any people in the area because it was far outside the city. There was a legend about a rich man who built it to hide his money. The woman joked that this place was perfect for surviving a war or an apocalypse. She laughed at her own joke. The main character didn't answer, but he liked everything. He agreed to move into the house and became its owner, because he was going to start preparing for the war. The next days were the happiest of his life. The boy was delighted with the new house and happier than ever. He needed money, so he decided to take out a large bank loan. But that bank wasn't so simple. They threatened to take his house and kill him if the money wasn't repaid. But that didn't scare him at all, because he knew he was doing it first and foremost for his own survival. The main character started training a lot. He needed to prepare his body for harsh trials. 2 months of constant training and discipline passed. Around the world, an unknown disease began to appear, and no one could explain its origin. People could get infected through a bite or the blood of an infected person. A person suffered in terrible agony while a human corset developed inside their body, literally devouring them alive. And within a few minutes, they would turn into a zombie and rise again. Zombies were not very fast or strong, but they had an advantage: their numbers. The capitals of countries were destroyed in the first month of the epidemic. From the very beginning, people tried to avoid zombies. But over time, everyone realized that the greatest danger was other people. In many cities, murders, robberies, and crime became everyday life. All of his comrades had been wiped out, so he was alone. Even so, he decided to prepare to the very end and risk everything for it. And even if there was no end and he wouldn't be in danger, he had spent a huge amount of money on preparations, because he believed it was far better than dying of hunger. The boy bought everything he needed. He enjoyed food and fresh air, because he knew that in less than half a year he wouldn't be able to eat normal food or enjoy life. He returned home thinking that soon everything would begin. The boy even stopped going to work and one day ran into his coworkers. He didn't answer phone calls and ignored them. Johansu had to hide and keep his secret, so this meeting was very unexpected for him. They were furious because they had to work instead of him, and Johansu hadn't even warned them. Johansu tried to apologize, but he couldn't make it up to them. But they couldn't convince him. He kept focusing on saving his own life and preparing. And later, he simply watched as his coworkers died. And the director used others to save his own life. He found one of the survivor camps, and he betrayed them and told everything to the enemies. As a result, everyone died. Now they wanted to know where the main character had disappeared to and why he wasn't going to work. But Johansu didn't answer. He just stood up and was about to leave. The director didn't like that because Johansu was speaking to him like an ordinary coworker. Suddenly, he grabbed the boy and tried to stop him. But Johansu got angry and warned the man never to touch him again. The director couldn't believe what had happened. It seemed his employee had gone crazy and no longer intended to work for him. When suddenly, right behind them, a mutant appeared and bit a foolish girl. It was a mutant, but Johansu didn't expect them to show up so quickly, because by his calculations, there were still a few months left until the disaster. Still, he was ready for it and was about to strike. Johansu drew the sword he always carried and was ready to enter the fight. The director didn't understand anything and was terrified. It seemed to him that Johansu was going to attack him. But that wasn't the case. Yohansu was trying to kill the zombie to stop the spread of the infection. His coworkers and the director were shocked to see the main character killing people on the street. But they didn't even realize it was necessary. Another strike. Now he tried to split the mutant in half, because the only way to stop it was to destroy the brain. Panic started in the street, and no one could understand what made him take this step. So many people began calling the police. Screams were heard in the city, and soon he understood. It had begun. Yohansu saw that the city streets were filled with infected. It was real madness, and besides, his preparations were not complete. However, now he understood that he hadn't prepared for the catastrophe for nothing. Suddenly, Yohansu realized he was scared. He couldn't explain the feeling, and besides, he didn't know why the mutants had appeared so early. But he knew everything had happened just as he expected, only much earlier. So now, while there weren't too many mutants in the city yet, he needed to get back to his house. An emergency news broadcast came on TV. Infected people all over the world were losing their minds and showing signs of violence and aggression. The forecasts were grim, because in 2 days the city would be completely paralyzed. Yohansu tried to run. He needed to get to his house as quickly as possible, where it was safe. But there were too many mutants on the streets, so it became very dangerous. He tried to fight, killing mutants in his way. His coworker wanted him to take her with him. He was very close with her at work, but now her appearance scared him a lot. But what had happened, and why did she suddenly decide to go with him? Still, he understood that she had acted wrongly. He was about to kill her brutally because he had told her not to touch him. At that moment, he realized he couldn't control himself. His body was reacting automatically, even though he didn't even want to kill her. But at the last moment, he decided to let her go and was going to check whether the mutants had injured her. Everything was fine. She was clean and had no wounds. She didn't know what was happening, but there was no time to explain. The girl felt that he had become very cold toward her. Lately, he had changed and she couldn't recognize him. Before, everything was fine, and everyone thought they were a couple. The boy couldn't hesitate anymore and was about to leave. At the last moment, she stopped him because she had special feelings for him. But he had no time for that, and he had no intention of staying in the city for her sake. She lived alone, so she wanted him to just go with her. She needed protection, because she couldn't handle it by herself. She was scared and the girl's whole body started shaking. Yohansu understood that she was a smart person, capable of solving any problems. At work, she was valued for her decency and responsibility. But even that didn't stop him, and he left. If she ended up in danger, he wouldn't help her. So he decided to escort her to her own home, and after that, she would be on her own. Now he needed to find out where there were the most mutants and which route was safest. He had studied anatomy for a long time and knew which parts of the human body were vulnerable. They were the temples, the eyes, and the neck. And if someone got close, those were the places you had to strike to stop and kill the attacker. He explained to the girl what she needed to do and gave her a knife so she could protect herself. But when he talked about zombies, she froze and couldn't believe his words. But there was no time to explain, because the mutants started attacking them. There was no room for doubt. If you wanted to survive, you had to be cold-blooded and kill the mutants. Even though they used to be human, there was no room for doubt, because hesitation could get someone killed. He demonstrated how to kill them properly and free yourself quickly. Right now, one of the mutants was directly behind her. The girl panicked. She hadn't expected it at all. When she saw it, she started screaming, and when she tried to strike, the knife slipped from her hands. The woman ended up on the ground, and now she was in real danger. The zombie started biting her, and she, from fear and helplessness, called Yohansu for help. But he couldn't save her, because he was surrounded by a crowd of mutants. He looked straight into her eyes and understood everything. Now it was impossible to save her, and everything was pointless. She understood too. This was the end for her, because he had warned her that he wouldn't help her, even when it was needed. Now she realized the boy wasn't joking. He meant it seriously. The mutant kept biting her, but the girl didn't lose hope of saving herself. Even so, she decided to fight to the very end, despite not believing she would survive. With all her strength, she stabbed the attacker with the knife, and began striking him straight in the head. After the first blow, the mutant let go of her, but she kept going to finish him off. He wouldn't die. The knife was too small to reach his brain. The zombie tried to bite her again, but this time it aimed for her neck. Then she remembered what the main character had said about the mutant's weak spots, and she decided to try striking right there. The girl grabbed her knife again and kept trying to kill it. This time, she succeeded. The knife got stuck in its head, right in the temple. Only after that strike did the zombie calm down and stop resisting, and blood from its head flowed straight onto her. Finally, she managed to kill it. The dead mutant's body was lying right on top of her. She tried to free herself from it and run away. The girl wanted to catch up with the main character, Luckily, he hadn't gone too far, and right now was killing a new army of mutants that surrounded him from all sides. Among them were real giants that weren't so easy to kill, but he had a special tactic for them. The most effective way to kill a mutant was to cut off its head. That was exactly what he was trying to do, and he didn't even notice other monsters starting to surround him. But the boy was ready even for that and could defend himself. His training hadn't been in vain. He had spent a whole month practicing sword fighting. Another strike, and now he was managing to kill even more mutants. The girl watching him didn't dare come closer. It seemed to her that Yohansu was born to kill mutants, because she had never seen him like that before, and couldn't even imagine that the quiet Yohansu was capable of this. But she knew for sure, if she wanted to survive, she had to stay close to him. To wipe the blood from his face, she found some tissues. After the fight, she walked up to him, because now they could feel safe. However, there was another danger. The girl didn't know whether the mutant had managed to bite her, but she didn't feel anything. Nothing hurt, but she saw how nervous the main character became because of her bite. He wanted to check her body for bite marks, and if she really was infected, he would have to kill her, and there was no doubt he would do it without hesitation. She understood that, so she became terribly frightened for her life. But if the infection was detected in time, many people around them could be kept safe. The girl couldn't undress in front of him right there on the street, but she understood she had no other choice. And if she didn't do it, he would kill her immediately. Then she wouldn't be able to go with him and would lose her only chance at salvation. So she agreed and started undressing. Yohansu seemed awkward, but he knew it was necessary. But when she had already started undressing, he couldn't take it and stopped her. Youngmi couldn't understand what had happened or why the main character stood up. He decided to check her leg through her pants and found that her skin was clean. There was only a slight bruise, but there was no open wound and no blood. Luckily, she was healthy, and she was very lucky not to get infected. Everything was fine, so they moved on. In another part of the city, he saw a taxi. Things were safe there and people didn't know what had happened. He decided to leave the girl right there, because it was too dangerous to go together any farther. He thought she could feel safe now. Besides, her clothes were covered in blood, so they would attract too much attention. But Youngmi didn't want to leave him, because only with him did she feel safe. At home, her mom, dad, and younger sister were waiting for her, so she had somewhere to go. But he had no one. He was alone, and all his relatives had been gone from his life for a long time. He remembered his mother from when he was a little boy. He went to work with her and remembered holding her hand. But later, everything changed. With pain in his heart, he watched parents come to school to pick up their children. It hurt him because he couldn't feel the same. He was left alone, because he had lost his parents long ago and now barely remembered anything about them. Here, their paths had to split, and from then on, he planned to go without her. Youngmi got scared and tried to stop him. She wanted to learn the address of the place he was going. Later, she wanted to come to him together with her family, but he refused her. Youngmi felt he was being too harsh toward her. But if they met again, would he be able to help her and let her go with him? But he had no answer to that question. He warned her not to go to crowded places and not to leave her home. A zombie wave is a terrifying phenomenon when many infected gather in one place. There was a risk that the stream of zombies could become endless. To stop this, gathering in groups larger than 20 people was banned, and those who broke this rule faced harsh punishment. Camps that ignored this rule wouldn't last longer than a month. Now the man needed to take care of resources, so he decided to stop by the local store in search of food and water. What interested him most was water and medicine, which the store had in large quantities. Finally, he made it to his own house. It was a place where he felt safe. He had a huge amount of supplies because he had been preparing for this day for a long time. He thought about Youngmi and knew it would be very hard for her to survive because all her life she had relied only on others. Suddenly, he heard strange voices outside. Had the mutants managed to reach his house? With such a rapid spread of the epidemic, zombies would take over the land very quickly. And only after a few months would people be able to find a way to survive. And only then did he plan to go out and unite several people into a group. No matter what happened, he was obligated to create an organization of survivors who would be the strongest on Earth. It was supposed to be a group of the most ruthless people, born to kill. But he was extremely nervous. He needed to do it faster than his enemies because soon a war between people would begin. People ready to destroy one another for resources. It was the 4th month since the zombie apocalypse began. A lot of people died in the first days because they ignored the basic rules of survival. Even people who formed groups couldn't stand against an army of mutants. Their supplies ran out, so they had to leave their shelters to look for provisions. Sometimes that could be a very big mistake. Almost half the group died. However, they didn't dare enter an open fight with the mutants and began to retreat. They managed to find an emergency exit from the store, so it seemed they were saved. They saw that their friends had also become infected and blocked their path. So the leader of the group ordered everyone to stop. They were very scared, and their hands started trembling. They saw a new wave of mutants approaching them, one they couldn't defeat with their own hands. The leader ordered everyone to run in different directions to distract the mutants. Suddenly, a girl from their group was also grabbed and they started biting her. The zombies tore her body apart and it became clear she was doomed. They had lost almost all their best fighters and were surrounded in the middle of a huge store. They had no other options, so the leader tried to break through and escape the trap. He fought, trying to push the mutants away from himself. After that, he tried to climb onto the shelves because only there the mutants wouldn't be able to reach him. The others couldn't understand what he was trying to do, so they stared at him in surprise. But there was no time to hesitate, and the man ordered everyone to urgently follow him. One by one, they tried to climb up onto the shelves, and before the mutants caught them, they managed to get up top one after another. But the man who climbed last was the least lucky. A mutant grabbed him by the leg and tried to drag him down. The hungry mutant stared straight at him and screamed. He tried to save his friend, so he attempted to cut off the mutant's arm. He had no other choice. This was the only way to help him. The shelves began to collapse. It was clear they were very weak and couldn't support the people. It was a huge risk because at any moment they could end up on the ground, surrounded by a crowd of mutants. The zombies came to the noise and now surrounded the people. They tried to reach them, so they shook the shelves. The girl lost hope of survival and started crying because she thought this was the end. Among the mutants, she saw her friend, who was now infected too. It seemed they were in a hopeless situation, but this was not the time to panic. Now they had to fight for their lives and come up with a new escape plan from the store. The leader didn't know what to do next. He had an idea, but he understood it was very risky. He wanted to climb down to distract the mutants and give the others a chance to escape. No one could believe he was truly ready to do that for them. But he immediately noticed an empty spot in the store where there were no mutants, and he wanted to try to lure their attention. While the mutants ran after him, the others would have a chance to climb down and try to leave the building. If he couldn't catch up with them, he would return to this spot again and try to do everything from the beginning. The people didn't want to let him go, because they believed it was suicide. They wanted to try to climb down together with him, because they couldn't believe there was no other option. But the leader didn't listen to anyone. He knew it was the only chance, because out of all of them, at least someone had to stay alive. But suddenly a new danger appeared. In the crowd, they saw a very tall zombie that could reach them. It came up to the shelves and grabbed one of the boys by the leg. The zombies began pulling him down, and now he had no chance of being saved. It was clear that this was the end. The leader tried to save him, but the others wouldn't let him do it. Suddenly, a shot rang out, and an arrow got stuck in the head of one of the mutants. It was killed, but none of the people had done it. But none of them had done it. That meant there were other people in the store. And as it turned out, it was the main character. He had also gone into the store to search for supplies and didn't expect to see other people there. The boy was lucky to survive. It seemed the mutants hadn't managed to bite him. He was terrified and couldn't calm down, because new mutants started closing in on him. But this time, he was lucky enough to escape from them as well. He tried to move very quickly and carefully. He was lucky the mutants weren't that fast. But now they had surrounded him and gave him no chance to get out. It seemed he was in deadly danger, because one of them tried to bite him and started attacking the boy. Yohansu fired his crossbow again. He wanted to save the boy and tried to help him. So he killed every mutant that came close to him. Unlike other people, he had a weapon and was prepared to face a huge number of zombies. With tears in his eyes, the boy looked at his savior. He thanked him for saving his life. But it wasn't over, because there were still many other problems inside the store. He had to jump down and engage them in close combat. With his sword, he killed them one by one. The other people watched him in shock and couldn't understand how he managed to remain unharmed. However, he was in danger too. Yohansu understood the monsters were all around him, and he couldn't let his guard down. So he tried to fend them off and not let them bite him. Among the mutants, there were some who were much stronger than the others. They weren't so easy to kill, and you had to use special tactics. But for that case, he had another weapon, a short dagger that he always carried and used in critical situations. He knew the weak spots on a mutant's body because he had studied them very well. But this time, the monster couldn't be killed so easily. It became clear that there were mutants with a special body structure and a different stage of mutation. They required a special approach, but he wasn't afraid of difficulties and wasn't going to stop. So again, several powerful strikes. And only after that was the zombie destroyed. The boy moved incredibly fast. He was trained and skilled. He managed to kill every mutant that came at him and tried to injure him. But after a while, he became very tired. Now he was convinced that the store was safe. The people who had been watching him the whole time didn't dare leave their safe spot. It seemed they were still frightened. They thought the hero had come for them and was trying to take what they had. But that wasn't the case. The boy forced them to come down and fight alongside him, because that was exactly what they had to do if they didn't want to die. The leader agreed and understood he shouldn't argue. But unlike him, the others were scared and trembling. He couldn't force them to go with him. But the mutants kept getting closer, so he grabbed his weapon. And after that, he jumped down himself, leaving his people in the safe place. Even though he didn't have a weapon like the main characters, he didn't fall behind. He tried to do everything he could. The man also knew the weak spots on the mutants' bodies and tried to strike exactly there. He did it with incredible fury and brutality, because he needed to avenge his dead comrades. The others tried to help him, since he had saved his life from a zombie that almost bit him. As it turned out, they had come down too, despite their fear. Now they were going to fight together. Dead mutant bodies lay on the ground. Johansu tried to collect his bolts, because it was very important to him. The others didn't dare ask him questions and only stayed close to him. He was going to help them get out of the store. So they all started moving after the main character, heading for the exit. But first, he wanted to check whether they were infected. For that, he made people undress. Only if he found no bite marks would he allow them to go with him. The boy understood that now he was in enormous danger, because he was the only one among the zombie crowd and had entered the risk zone. The main character didn't even suspect what could happen next, because the mutants would keep getting closer, and they would have no chance of getting out alive. So the man sacrificed his own life to give him a chance to escape. He would stay inside the store and close the door behind him, and the others would remain where they could go no farther. He sacrificed himself to give him a chance to survive, and would remain forever within the walls of the store. Back then, Johansu couldn't even imagine such a fate awaited him. He only heard his scream but couldn't help in any way. This was exactly what he feared most. He couldn't believe people were capable of sacrificing their own lives. After the check, the leader introduced himself. His name was Kang Gun. He thanked the hero for arriving just in time and saving them. But the main character's behavior shocked him, because Johansu replied that they had survived only thanks to luck. If he hadn't arrived in time, they all would have died. These people had united into a camp from the very beginning, and when they ran out of supplies and food, they decided to go up and try to loot the local store. They were risking their lives heavily. The first time they tried to get into the store, the same fate awaited them. But then they had to escape, because the leader made a hard decision. He sacrificed his own brother's life to save the others. But many other people died near the emergency exit. He managed to be the only one left alive, so he returned to the camp with nothing. Johansu looked at them very suspiciously. He noticed something very strange in their behavior. He expected this could have happened much earlier, so he decided to come to the store much later to see whether they could handle it on their own. Besides, he realized these people weren't the same as the ones he had seen in his previous timeline, and that meant he had lost the ability to predict the future. He needed to find out whether people lived in that building. As it turned out, there was a huge basement under the store where they constantly hid. Johansu couldn't believe the man told him about their shelter so easily. Then he asked how much food they had left, and he saw them become confused after that question. He had many questions because a recent unpleasant incident had happened. Johansu wanted to hear him out. Kang Gun wanted to know whether the main character had friends, but he realized he was alone. How had he managed to hold on so long if he was alone the whole time? Johansu replied that he knew what would happen, so he had plenty of food at his house. He had stockpiled huge reserves and prepared well for the catastrophe. He had one more question, but the main character stopped him. Now it was his turn to ask questions, and he asked why they came to the store if they still had food supplies left. Now he understood that Johansu was much smarter, because if he had enough supplies, he wouldn't risk his own life and the lives of his friends. Kang Gun replied that they had no other choice. They were trying to get into the warehouse where they wanted to find water and other valuable supplies. The main character knew that building, so it frightened him greatly. Before coming here, Johansu had checked all the surrounding buildings. He knew there were a lot of zombies at the warehouse, so getting supplies was simply impossible. Kang Gun couldn't believe this man had managed to scout all the buildings before the apocalypse started. Now he knew it was simply impossible to kill all the mutants in the building. People who built shelters for themselves ended up in a dangerous situation. At first, he suggested clearing at least this building of zombies and was going to help them if they allowed him to stay in the camp. But Kang Gun didn't believe they could do it. But the boy knew of 3 exits that could be used to leave the building, so they needed to be blocked before starting the operation. They had to close the main gate in the parking lot because that was where many mutants were entering from. The people listened to him and couldn't believe he had managed to learn so much.